And environmental officials say the Main Pass Oil Gathering Company's pipeline oil leak could have released more than 1 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. A unified command has been created to help deal with the oil and its impacts. Andres Fuentes, who's at this morning's meeting, he's got the latest on this. Andres.
Liz, as of right now, the 67-mile pipeline is completely shut off while crews figure out where the leak is and how it all happened. At today's press conference, officials tell us that the Main Pass Oil Gathering Companies shut off the pipeline Thursday morning around 6:30 after their meters showed an anomaly. But it wasn't until a helicopter reported an oil slick about 20 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi River that the Coast Guard and other emergency crews were actually alerted and called in. Officials say that it's just hard to pinpoint right now just how much oil has been leaked into the Gulf of Mexico until they find where that leak is. They also say the weather conditions is also affecting how the crews are monitoring the situation.
We had very, very high winds and very high sea state, very rough seas. After that, we experienced several days of calmer weather. And so the oil that had been suspended in the top several feet of the water column could have had the opportunity to then resurface and float on top of the surface of the water again. We do believe we experienced that. That would have come up as a very, very light sheen or small amounts of emulsified product or the globules, as the captain has mentioned.
Now, officials say the pipeline shutdown affects 7 producers in the area, but that no shoreline threats have been reported thus far. Still, officials are monitoring that situation and any potential harms to wildlife. They also say vessels can travel through that area while emergency crews monitor the situation. Back to you, Liz.